Over several more years, BlackRock began to add advisors and board members that included politicians, central bankers, and Wall Street insiders. That's quite the hubbub of people. Not only did Fink continue to mingle with these types, but in 2019, it was reported that Biden and Fink were meeting often and making deals. Interesting. Interesting. This was during the play where before the elections, Biden was talking about how Wall Street needs to decline, and he's all about the intermediary homes and stuff like that. But at the same time, he's talking about that he's mingling with Fink. Interesting. 2019 is very big. Now this is where things get. I mean, this is where it's at. 2019 is big because in August of 2019, Fink joined the WEF Board of Trustees. The World Economic Forum appoints new members to Board of Trustees, and you will see Lawrence D. Fink right there. The Board of Trustees is like the top dogs of the WEF, by the way. Now, with that, also on the Board of Trustees, there's Lawrence D. Fink right there, of course. You will see Chrystia Friedland. I know a lot of Canadians will recognize her. Well, she just kind of shot out of a cannon and came out of nowhere, being a part of the WEF elitist group. Now, you may notice why am I pointing her out? What does she have to do with BlackRock? Well, not necessarily has to do with BlackRock, but it does have to do with the crisis, because she was the one that she was a part of the Financial Times. She was a reporter there who interviewed Soros in 2009, where he explained about the crisis. This is the same thing that we talked about in the tearing down the curtain episode, where he was talking about the controlled de-dollarization, or lowering the value of the dollar, and then China being the engine for it and everything like that. Well, there's another aspect of it where he just blatantly tells you what's going on. This is the interview. This is why I want to.
This would be the time, because you really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order, financial world order. They are kind of reluctant members of the IMF. They play along, but they don't make much of a contribution because it's not their institution. Their share is not commensurate. Their voting rights are not commensurate to their weight. So I think you need a new world order that China has to be part of the process of creating it, and they have to buy in. They have to own it the same way as, let's say, the United States owns the Washington Consensus, the current order.
Yeah, it's all just full circle, guys. It's all just one big club, as George Carlin would say, and you're not in it. I'm not in it. But those two are definitely in it. And so back then you see Friedland, who was a reporter with the Financial Times, interviewing Soros in 2009, where he basically just gave it up and said, hey, this is going to be the start of a new world order, and China's going to be leading it. And he talked about the de-dollarization, he talked about the creating of it, talked about how China's going to be involved with it, and then all of a sudden, Friedland is involved with the WEF, and she's the financial minister of Canada and all this stuff, and it's all full circle. It's all full circle, and she's on the board of trustees. It's amazing how quickly that happens. So that's just a little side trail, but it still has to do with just the fact of the 07-08 crash was planned, and it was a trigger. You're talking about China, who is definitely involved with this thing going on. There's still the notion going around that China and Russia aren't a part of it. They are. They just are, guys. And you're seeing that trigger that happened during this period also helped launch BlackRock into where they are, so much so that you even saw Fink get involved with all this. So in 2019, Fink joined the WEF, the Board of Trustees. Now, for this next part, this is the part where, I mean, it could get really, really complicated. I try to make this as simple, bare bones as absolutely possible to make this super easy, because we have to understand this part in order for everything else to make sense. So it's important to have a basic, I mean, very basic idea of the U.S. monetary system. There's two different things. So like the CBDC, you know how there's the retail and the wholesale? Well, the fiat system that we have now is the same thing. There's the retail money or the bank money that goes between us and the banks. That's what we use. And then there's the reserve money that's held by the feds, the Federal Reserve. When the phrase printing money gets used, that's reserve money and not retail dollars. So in this system, how it would go is when they print money, that money went into the reserve, which then allowed the retail banks, the banks to lend out more cash. That money just didn't go straight out there. So that's kind of like the basic thing. So when the Fed prints, it ultimately allows the banks to lend out more. This gap between the Fed and the reserve money and the banks and the retail money is supposed to keep things in balance in a fiat system. Good luck keeping things in balance on a fiat system, because it's a bogus form of monetary system, just saying. But that's how it works. So that's the very, very basic level of that. But when the printing in 2008 began, because that's part of the stimulus and the bailouts and everything like that, it didn't actually allow banks to lend like it was supposed to. So the money kept stacking up in the reserve. They kept printing, but the banks weren't really allowed to release more retail money out into the economy. That's part of the de-dollarization of it. So while the reserve money keeps stacking up, the value continues to drop. You see it now? You see how that works? So with this new broken system, quote unquote, they knew what they were doing, but this new broken system running, when the bailouts of 2020 happened, all of a sudden, for the first time, the retail money went lockstep with the Fed's balance sheet, the reserve money, something that it shouldn't do. And so I got a visual aid on this. If we take a look, you got the red line, which is retail, and then you've got the blue, which is the balance sheet. Well, there was a pretty big gap there. And then all of a sudden, in 2019, September 2019, right before everything went wild in 2020, they connected, and they went lockstep. Something that it shouldn't do. Now, why did it do that? Why? Well, the same year that BlackRock's Fink joined the WEF in August, he joined the WEF in August of 2019. Well, also in August of 2019, BlackRock released an August report called Dealing with the Next Downturn: From Unconventional Monetary Policy to Unprecedented Policy Coordination. So just keep that in mind. Right before the 2020 event, the same month that Fink joined the WEF Board of Trustees, they released this. And you'll notice the authors of it: BlackRock Investment, BlackRock Investment, BlackRock Investment, Vice Chairman BlackRock, BlackRock Investment. Now, what is this thing? Why is this important? What does this play? This new approach that we saw the two monetary systems join, this new approach that they're talking about in this document, was a direct injection, eliminating the balance system that was broken in 2008, on purpose, of course. So basically what this was doing is they now were skipping the whole print money for the reserve, and then allow the banks to lend based on that. They were skipping that. What they were doing is they were printing money and sending it straight out into the economy. They were skipping the whole system that they purposely broke in 2008. And so as soon as this happened, you saw the retail money and the reserve money go hand in hand. Why? Because it was sending it straight out. The retail money became the reserve money, or vice versa, however you want to put it at that point. And that was all BlackRock's doing. They made that system. That's why Fink joined the WEF Board of Trustees. He had a system put in place for this, and that's why he joined it. The direct approach involved central banks injecting money directly into the economy and coordinating fiscal policy through emergency fiscal facilities. It was then BlackRock stated in the reports the need for the going direct reset. Going direct reset. This was part of the great reset that we're still seeing take place now. Some people are sitting there going, I'm still waiting for this great reset. Take a look around. It's going on right now. They created a special purpose facility called the SEF, or SEFF, which stands for Standing Emergency Fiscal Facilities. And this would allow the injection of retail money directly into commercial accounts of public and private sector entities. Again, they are bypassing the standard order that a fiat system works on, and they're injecting it straight into the economy. That's why, again, we saw in those charts, at the same time this happened, boom, they basically became one. This was introduced again in August 2019, just before 2020 unleashed, and less than a month after this new system was introduced by BlackRock. And I'll say this again, less than a month after this new system was introduced by BlackRock, so August 19th, less than a month right before 2020 happened, central banks were already implementing it, all perfectly timed. Sure seems like this thing was already planned, ready to go ahead of time, right? Because there's no way that all these central banks would just instantly start putting that together in less than a month. No, they knew it was coming. They knew what was going on. It was all planned. It started in 07 and 08. That was the first step. Then we got to this. That's just more proof that 2020 was planned. Here's the tasty part. It is delicious. With BlackRock's system now active and central banks pumping trillions directly into the economy, who would manage this bailout? BlackRock. BlackRock would manage this bailout. In March of 2020, the Fed hired BlackRock to manage 3 bailout programs. Straight from the New York Times, Fed releases details of BlackRock deal for virus response. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, would earn relatively modest fees for helping the Federal Reserve run a bond buying program to steady markets unsettled by the pandemic. These 3 programs that the Fed basically hired BlackRock to run include the Fed's commercial mortgage-backed securities program, newly issued corporate bond purchases, and existing investment-grade bonds and credit ETF purchases. Basically, BlackRock was gaining control of the U.S. government's financial system. They were gaining control of the money. This ultimately granted access to government funds and allowed BlackRock to bail out its own assets. Check this headline out. In Fink, we trust. That's unsettling. BlackRock is now 4th branch of government. Wow. If that doesn't speak volumes, I don't know what would. That's something else, guys. I mean, in one headline, not only did they replace God with Fink, But now BlackRock apparently is the fourth branch of the government. Which, is anybody really shocked by that? Think about it. Think about it. Look at what they own. Look at who they're involved with. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's so much the fourth branch of the government as the branch that oversees the other three. Honestly, that's how I'm viewing it. So again, this ultimately granted access to the government funds. BlackRock had control of the government money and allowed BlackRock to bail out its own assets. So what does that mean? The Fed allowed BlackRock to buy its own bonds to increase their own profits while the taxpayers eat it. What they did is they got control of the Fed's money. Then they started to bail out their own funds and buy their own bonds using the government's money, increasing how much they're worth while the taxpayers, you guys, fund it. What this is it's a wealth transfer. That's what this is. What they're doing is they're taking money from your pockets and sending it straight up into BlackRock's fund. That's what this was doing. It was a giant wealth transfer. This is something that we were talking a lot about during 2020, where basically all of the mom and pop shops, all the small time gigs, all them, they had to shut down for that period. But yet Walmart and Amazon and all the big companies were allowed to stay open. So all the money was getting funneled into them. Well, this was another version of that, where while BlackRock was using government's money to bail out not only their friends' banks, but their own banks, increase their bonds and do all this stuff, basically taking all of your money and putting it up into theirs. So there was a double strike of wealth transfer. It was the retail stuff going to Amazon and Walmart and all those. And then the bank was taking it on the other side, all while under the disguise of, we're going to send you helicopter money. We're going to send you stimulus money. Da, 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 da. While at the same time, basically, if you can picture a cartoon, they're handing you $1 while they're reaching around taking your entire wallet. That's what they're doing. That's what this system was doing. This allowed BlackRock to just take full control of government's money and become what we're seeing today. That's how this happened. So much so, in Q2 of 2020, so in the second quarter of 2020 alone, BlackRock's revenue rose 11.5% to $261 million. That's just in the second quarter of 2020 due to the transfer. And it's only gotten bigger. It has only gotten bigger. Not only was BlackRock increasing revenue through taxpayer expense, but they were also charging fees to the Fed on top of it. So not only were they taking your money and increasing their wealth, but they were also charging the government at the same time for doing it. I mean, talk about double dipping. I mean, that is the greatest scheme, the greatest scam that I've ever seen in my entire life. I'll be honest, guys. Sometimes you just got to say, that's brilliant. It's brilliant. So brilliant, the only way that this could happen is the elite group doing it and the government allowing it to happen. It's all working in conjunction together. This was a part of the takeover. This was a part of the collapsing of America. This is not just America, but all the countries. This is about taking over all of the wealth in all the countries, doing the wealth transfer, making everybody poor. This is about gaining control of companies and money and land and all this stuff. This was about getting all this money sucked up to the elites. This was the biggest wealth transfer, all while dropping down the U.S., dropping down the dollar and doing this. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about everything's planned. This is, everybody's on board with this. Everybody is doing this. And this started way back in that little crisis. I'm sure it started further back than that, but I didn't go that far. Sorry. But the '08 crisis, I mean, that's when the trigger was pulled. That was That was the start of the Great Reset, in my opinion. Because there were so many things that came out of that that needed to happen to get to the point that we're at now. It wasn't just the United States. Like I was saying, though, BlackRock was now working with central banks worldwide on the same thing. Here's a couple of them. April 2020, Bank of Canada. Interesting. Freeland, huh? In 2020, BlackRock came to the aid of the Bank of Canada, which is Canada's central bank. That was April of 2020 that they did that. Bank of Canada to introduce a provisional bond purchase program. That's BlackRock's program. Also in May of 2020, we've got Riksbank, which is Sweden's central bank, who also hired BlackRock. Now there's other ones. But that gives you the idea. They were working all around the world. It was a giant wealth transfer globally, not just the United States. We're not that special, guys. I know we like to talk about the US a lot and all that stuff, but we're not that special. BlackRock was doing it to everybody. There's others as well, like I said, utilizing BlackRock's financial market advisory program to help manage their corporate bonds buying program. And it wasn't just central banks. They were also working on smaller banks in other countries as well.